From dream to nightmare, my year in the Bangkok Hilton. Hello, Extreme Expat Stories team. I've been a fan of your channel for a while now, but I've never written before. After what happened to me though, I finally have a story that sounds too wild to be made up. I'm a British guy in my early 30s who came to Thailand last year looking for a fresh start. And I swear I went through one crazy misadventure after another. From being scammed and brokenhearted to waking up behind bars in the infamous Bangkok Hilton. This email is long, but every detail is true. Here goes. Back home in Birmingham, I was working as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company. Same gray cubicle, same fluorescent lights, same mind-numbing routine for 5 years straight. I'd wake up at 6:30 a.m., grab a coffee from the same corner shop, catch the 7:45 train, and spend 9 hours staring at code that felt increasingly meaningless. My girlfriend Natalie had left me 6 months earlier, saying I'd become emotionally unavailable, and that she felt like she was dating a ghost. She wasn't wrong. The breaking point came during a particularly soul-crushing team meeting about quarterly projections. As my manager droned on about our deliverables, I found myself Googling one-way tickets to Bangkok under the table. The cheapest flight was £420. I had about £18,000 in savings, more than enough to disappear for a while. That night, I handed in my resignation via email. My boss called me crazy. My parents were disappointed but not surprised. My few remaining friends thought I was having a midlife crisis. Maybe I was. But for the first time in years, I felt something other than numbness. Excitement. Bangkok hit me like a wall of heat, humidity, and pure sensory overload. The moment I stepped out of Suvarnabhumi airport, I was sweating through my Manchester United shirt, but I was grinning like an idiot. The taxi ride into the city was a revelation. Neon signs in Thai scripts, street food vendors on every corner, the organized chaos of traffic that somehow just worked. I found a serviced apartment near Thong Lor for 25,000 baht a month, about £600, which felt like luxury compared to my cramped London flat that cost 3 times as much. The first few weeks were like being a kid in a candy store. I'd wake up whenever I wanted, grab a 40 baht pad thai from the street vendor downstairs, and spend my days exploring temples, markets, and rooftop bars with stunning views of the city. Within a month, I'd found a job teaching English at a small private school in Sukhumvit. The pay was only 40,000 baht a month, but combined with my savings, I felt rich. The kids were adorable, calling me Teacher James, and giggling at my attempts to speak Thai. My colleagues were a mix of local teachers and other expats who'd found their way to Thailand through various routes, some running from divorce, others from debts, a few just seeking adventure. Life felt like an adventure movie where I was finally the protagonist instead of a background character. I joined a rugby club, learned to ride a motorbike, and even started taking Thai language classes. For the first time since university, I felt like I was actually living instead of just existing. I met her at a coffee shop in Emporium Mall on a rainy Saturday afternoon in November. I was grading papers and struggling with my intermediate Thai textbook when she approached my table with a shy smile. "Excuse me, are you studying Thai? I can help you if you want to practice speaking." Nida was stunning, not just physically, though she was beautiful with long black hair and warm brown eyes. But she had this genuine curiosity about the world that I found magnetic. She was 28, working as a nurse at a private hospital in Phnom Penh, and studying part-time to become a pediatric specialist. Her English was better than my Thai, which wasn't saying much, but we communicated through a charming mix of both languages, hand gestures and Google Translate. Our first proper date was at Lumpini Park. She brought homemade somtam and taught me how to feed the fish in the pond. She laughed at my clumsy attempts to use chopsticks and patiently corrected my pronunciation of Thai words. When I asked her why she was being so kind to a confused foreigner, she said, "Because you seem like you have a good heart, and you look very sad sometimes." She was right. Despite the excitement of my new life, I was carrying around a loneliness I hadn't fully acknowledged. Nida filled that void in ways I didn't expect. She introduced me to her culture, taking me to her favorite temple, teaching me to make curry paste from scratch, showing me the Bangkok that tourists never see. After 2 months of dating, she mentioned her son, Kamon, who was 7 years old. She'd been worried about introducing him to a foreign boyfriend, but when we finally met at a weekend market, he immediately started teaching me Thai curse words and showing me his collection of toy cars. I fell for both of them hard. By February, we were practically living together. I'd never felt so content. I started imagining a future here, maybe opening a small English school, learning Thai fluently, becoming a stepfather to Kamon. I even looked into the requirements for getting a long-term visa. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in March. I'd just finished teaching my last class and was heading home when Nida called, her voice shaking with excitement. "James, I need to see you tonight. I have something important to tell you." She was waiting at my apartment when I arrived, pacing nervously on the balcony. The moment I walked in, she grabbed my hands and looked straight into my eyes. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like lightning. My first reaction was pure joy. I picked her up and spun her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. We talked for hours about names, about what kind of parents we wanted to be, about how Kamon would react to having a little brother or sister. I called my parents the next morning. Despite their initial skepticism about my Thailand adventure, they were thrilled about becoming grandparents. My mom immediately started planning a visit to meet Nida and see the baby when it arrived. For a week, I was walking on air. I started looking at larger apartments, researching international schools for Kamon, and even bought a book about pregnancy in Thai to better understand what Nida was going through. Then came the family emergency. "James, I'm so sorry to ask this, but we need your help." Nida was crying when she called me at work the following Tuesday. Her voice was desperate, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. "My grandmother in Chiang Mai. She's had a stroke. She's in intensive care, and the doctors say she needs immediate surgery or she'll die. The hospital wants 500,000 baht upfront before they'll operate." My heart sank. That was roughly 12,000 UK pounds. A huge sum, but not impossible given my savings. Nida explained that her family had some money, but it was tied up in property, and they couldn't access it immediately. She promised they'd pay me back within a week once they could liquidate some assets. "I know it's a lot to ask," she sobbed, "but you're the only person I trust, and I can't lose my grandmother." She raised me after my parents died. I'd never heard about her parents dying, but in the crisis of the moment, I didn't register it as strange. I was thinking about my own grandmother, who passed away when I was in university. If I'd had the money to save her, I would have spent every penny without hesitation. I transferred the money that afternoon. The next morning, I tried calling Nida to check on her grandmother's condition. The phone went straight to voicemail. I assumed she was at the hospital and would call when she had news. By evening, I was worried. I went to her apartment building, but the security guard told me she'd checked out that morning with several suitcases. My stomach dropped. I called her hospital. They said she'd called in sick and hadn't shown up for her shift in 3 days. The horrible truth was dawning on me, but I couldn't accept it. I spent the next 2 days calling every hospital in Chiang Mai, asking about an elderly woman who'd had a stroke. None of them had any record of such a patient. On Friday, I got a text from an unknown number. "Sorry, James. Had to go back to family in Isan. We'll contact you soon. Take care of yourself." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no mention of the money. I tried calling the number, but it was already disconnected. I sat in my empty apartment, staring at my bank balance, and realized I had been played. The woman I loved, the woman carrying my child, the woman I'd built my future around. She'd been running a long con from the beginning. The pregnancy, the sweet moments, the talk of our future together, all of it was a lie designed to make me trust her with my life savings. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on teaching. My students noticed something was wrong. Teacher James was no longer the enthusiastic foreigner who made learning English fun. I was a zombie going through the motions. I started drinking heavily, not just a few beers after work, but serious drinking. I'd wake up hungover, teach my classes on autopilot, then head straight to the nearest bar and drink until closing time. My rugby teammates tried to intervene, but I pushed them away. I was embarrassed, heartbroken, and angry at myself for being so naive. The worst part was the constant second-guessing. Had any of it been real? Did she ever have feelings for me? Or was I just a mark from day one? Was she really pregnant? Or was that part of the scam too? I'd find myself analyzing every conversation, every gesture, looking for clues I'd missed. My savings were dwindling fast. Between the money I'd given Nida and my increased spending on alcohol, I was burning through what should have been a year's worth of expenses in a matter of weeks. That's when I met Danny. Danny was an Australian guy in his 40s who seemed to have everything figured out. He drove a nice car, lived in a penthouse apartment, and always had money to spend. We met at a bar in Nana, where I was drowning my sorrows alone on a Thursday night. "You look like a man who could use some good news," he said, sliding into the seat next to me. I probably told him too much about my situation. The alcohol made me talkative, and he was a good listener. He sympathized with my story about Nida, said he'd been scammed by Thai women himself before he figured out the system. "The thing is, mate," he said, "you can't just sit here feeling sorry for yourself. You need to go make that money back, and I know exactly how to do it." He told me about cryptocurrency investment opportunity that was supposedly making huge returns. Some new coin that was about to explode in value. He showed me charts on his phone, testimonials from other investors, screenshots of his own massive profits. I started with just 100,000 baht 6 months ago. Look at this, he said, showing me his portfolio. It showed over 2 million baht in profits. I was skeptical at first, but Danny was persuasive. He didn't pressure me. In fact, he seemed almost reluctant to share the opportunity. I only tell people I really trust, he said. And honestly, you seem like you need a break. My desperation clouded my judgment. I had about 200,000 baht left in my savings, enough to live on for a couple of months, but not enough to rebuild my life. The idea of doubling or tripling that money was intoxicating. Danny introduced me to his investment advisor, a smooth-talking British guy named Marcus, who claimed to be a former Goldman Sachs trader. Marcus set me up an account for me on some offshore platform that looked professional and legitimate. I watched my deposit go in and for the first few days saw it growing exactly as promised. Then, just like with Nida, the communication stopped. Danny's phone went to voicemail. Marcus disappeared. The investment platform website showed an error message. In the span of 48 hours, I went from thinking I was about to get my life back to realizing I'd been scammed again. I was now completely broke in a foreign country, with no savings, no safety net, and no idea how to dig myself out of the hole I'd fallen into. I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. I moved to a backpacker hostel in Khao San Road, the kind of place I'd avoided when I first arrived because it seemed too touristy and chaotic. Now it was all I could afford. The room was a nightmare. 8 bunk beds crammed into a space meant for 4, with paper-thin walls, no air conditioning, and a shared bathroom that smelled like a sewer. My roommates were a rotating cast of gap year students, budget backpackers, and other expats who'd hit hard times. I was living on instant noodles and whatever free food I could find. The school I worked for hadn't paid me in 2 weeks because I'd been calling in sick so often. I was behind on rent even at the hostel and facing eviction. I knew I should call my parents, swallow my pride, and ask for help, but I was too ashamed. How could I explain that I'd blown through my entire life savings in less than 6 months? How could I admit that I'd been so easily manipulated? Instead, I started drinking even more heavily. It was the only way to numb the constant anxiety and self-loathing. I'd wake up every morning with a crushing hangover and the knowledge that I'd made terrible decisions. But by evening I'd be back at the same bar, drinking away the pain. My life had become a cycle of self-destruction, and I couldn't see a way out. The night everything fell apart was supposed to be different. I'd managed to get paid for a week's worth of teaching and decided to treat myself to a proper meal and maybe just 1 or 2 beers to celebrate. No more drinking myself into oblivion. I was going to start making better choices. I met up with 2 other expat teachers at a bar in Patpong. We had a dinner, shared some laughs, and I felt almost human again for the first time in weeks. They were good guys who'd been worried about me, and it felt good to have friends who cared. But as the evening wore on, the old patterns reasserted themselves. 1 beer became 3, then 5, then I lost count. My friends tried to get me to call it a night, but I insisted I was fine. I'd take a taxi home, I promised. No problem. Instead, I stumbled out of the bar around 1 a.m. and saw a motorbike taxi waiting. In my drunken state, I thought I could save money by taking the bike instead of a car. The driver took one look at me and shook his head. I was obviously too drunk to be a passenger. That's when I spotted the rental scooter parked nearby. I'd been riding for months when I was sober, and in my drunken state, I convinced myself I was fine to drive. I found the owner, a young Thai guy who was clearly reluctant to rent to someone in my condition. But I flashed some cash and insisted it was okay. The first few minutes of the ride felt liberating. The cool night air, the empty streets, the neon lights blurring past. It was like flying. I was riding through the heart of Bangkok, feeling free for the first time in months. I don't remember exactly what happened next. I was speeding down a narrow soi, probably going way too fast, when I saw another motorbike coming from the opposite direction. There was a family on it, a woman, a man, and what looked like a small child squeezed between them. I tried to swerve, but I was going too fast and my reflexes were too slow. The collision was devastating. The sound of metal crashing against metal, the screech of tires on wet pavement, the horrible silence that followed. I remember lying on the road, my head ringing, warm blood running down my arms. The family's bike was twisted into an unrecognizable mess. The woman was crying, the man was unconscious, and the child was screaming in Thai. Neighbors started appearing from nearby houses. Someone called an ambulance. I tried to stand up, but my legs gave out. Through the fog of alcohol and adrenaline, I realized the magnitude of what I'd done. I'd seriously injured innocent people because I was too drunk and stupid to make responsible choices. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, worried faces, and medical staff speaking rapid Thai. I was treated for cuts and bruises. Miraculously, my injuries were minor. The family I'd hit weren't so lucky. The man had broken arm and a leg, along with internal injuries that required surgery. The woman had a concussion and several broken ribs. The child, thankfully, had only minor cuts and bruises, but was traumatized and kept crying for his parents. The police officer was waiting for me when I was discharged. He was a stern-looking man in his 50s who spoke enough English to make the situation crystal clear. You drink, you drive, you hurt Thai family. This is very serious crime. He explained that I was being charged with drunk driving, reckless endangerment, and causing grievous bodily harm. The penalties could include years in prison and massive fines. Thai man needs surgery, cost 30,000 baht for hospital. Motorbike broken, cost 5,000 baht. You pay now, or you go to jail tonight. I felt like I was drowning. I had maybe 3,000 baht to my name, not even close to what I needed. I tried to explain my situation, but the officer wasn't interested in sob stories. You Farang, you have money. Find money or go to prison. I spent the next few hours in a panic, calling everyone I knew in Thailand. My former colleagues at the school couldn't help. They were teachers living paycheck to paycheck. My rugby teammates were sympathetic but couldn't come up with that kind of cash on short notice. I managed to sell my laptop and phone to a pawn shop for 15,000 baht and borrowed another 10,000 from a friend who cleaned out his own savings to help me. It wasn't enough. By 10 p.m., the officer had run out of patience. He cuffed me and led me to a holding cell in the police station. Tomorrow, you go to real prison, he said. Maybe judge show mercy, maybe not. That first night in the holding cell was the longest of my life. The cell was cramped, hot, and smelled like urine and despair. I shared it with two other foreigners, a German guy caught with marijuana, and a Dutchman who'd been arrested for fighting outside a bar. We hardly spoke, but there was an understanding between us. We were all stupid foreigners who'd made terrible decisions and were now facing the consequences in a legal system we didn't understand. The next morning, I was transferred to Klong Prem Central Prison, the infamous Bangkok Hilton, to await trial. The bus ride was a nightmare. We were shackled together in leg irons, packed into a sweltering vehicle with no air conditioning, and driven through Bangkok traffic for over an hour. The prison itself was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It was a massive concrete complex surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire. The guards were stern and efficient, processing new inmates with the casual indifference of people who'd seen thousands of foreigners pass through. I was strip searched, given a prison uniform, and assigned to a cell with 12 other men. The cell was about the size of a small bedroom, with no beds, no chairs, and a single squat toilet in the corner. We slept on thin mats on the concrete floor. My cellmates were a mix of Thai and foreign prisoners. There was a British guy serving time for drug smuggling, an American caught with illegal weapons, and several Thai men imprisoned for various crimes. Despite the circumstances, there was a strange camaraderie among us. We looked out for each other, shared food, and helped newcomers adjust to the harsh realities of prison life. The daily routine was brutal. We woke at 5 a.m. for roll call, had a breakfast of rice and thin soup, then spent the day in various work details or educational programs. The heat was oppressive, the food was barely edible, and the constant noise made it impossible to find any peace. But perhaps the hardest part was the psychological toll. I had hours every day to think about how I'd ended up there, about all the stupid decisions that had led to this moment. The regret was overwhelming. My embassy had arranged for a local lawyer, a kind Thai woman named Kun Somchai, who spoke excellent English and had experience with cases involving foreigners. She was honest about my situation. It wasn't good. The evidence is very clear, she explained during our first meeting. You were drunk, you caused the accident, you injured innocent people. The judge will not be sympathetic. She recommended that I plead guilty and throw myself on the mercy of the court. If I fought the charges and lost, I could face the maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. If I accepted responsibility and showed remorse, I might get a reduced sentence. The trial was a surreal experience. The courtroom was formal and intimidating, with the judge sitting behind an elevated bench while lawyers spoke in rapid Thai. I understood almost nothing of what was being said, relying on my translator to explain the proceedings. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the judge and did my best to express my remorse in broken Thai. I explained that I was deeply sorry for my actions, that I accepted full responsibility, and that I would do whatever I could to make amends to the family I'd hurt. The judge listened impassively, then delivered his verdict. Through my translator, I learned that I was sentenced to 2 years in prison, reduced to 1 year because of my guilty plea. I was also fined 50,000 baht and required to pay for the victim's medical expenses. As the gavel came down, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. 1 year was better than 5, but it was still a year of my life lost to this concrete hell. The months that followed were a test of endurance I never thought I'd face. Prison has its own ecosystem. its own rules, its own hierarchy. As a foreigner, I was viewed with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion by the Thai inmates, and I gradually earned their respect by showing humility and trying to learn their language. I was assigned to work in the prison laundry, which was actually considered a decent job. The work was hard and monotonous, but it gave me something to do and helped pass the time. I also enrolled in Thai language classes, figuring that if I was going to be there for a year, I might as well use the time productively. The other foreign inmates became my lifeline. We shared stories, complaints, and small luxuries like instant coffee or cigarettes when we could get them. There was Mark, a Canadian who'd been caught smuggling drugs and was serving a 3-year sentence. There was Hans, a German who'd been involved in a hit-and-run accident similar to mine. And there was Ahmed, a Bangladeshi man who'd been arrested for working without a permit and was facing deportation. We looked out for each other, shared news from home when we got letters, and helped newcomers adjust to prison life. In a strange way, we became a family of sorts, united by our experience of being foreigners in a very foreign place. The hardest part was the mental challenge, the boredom, the constant noise, the lack of privacy, the knowledge that life was continuing outside while I was stuck in this concrete box. I started having panic attacks, especially at night when the reality of my situation would hit me. I also had to deal with the guilt. I'd hurt innocent people because of my own selfishness and stupidity. I wrote letters to the family I'd injured, apologizing and promising to make it right when I got out. I never got a response, but writing the letters helped me process my guilt. I served exactly 10 months of my sentence before being released for good behavior. Walking out of those prison gates was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. After so long in a controlled environment, the chaos of Bangkok traffic and the freedom to go wherever I wanted was almost overwhelming. My embassy had arranged for me to be deported immediately upon release. I was escorted directly from the prison to the airport, where I boarded a flight to London, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a deep sense of shame. The Thailand I'd fallen in love with 2 years earlier felt like a different lifetime. The adventure, the romance, the sense of possibility, all of it had been replaced by trauma, regret, and a hard-earned understanding of how quickly life can spiral out of control. I'm writing this email from a small flat in Birmingham, where I'm slowly trying to rebuild my life. I'm working as a freelance programmer, living paycheck to paycheck, and dealing with the psychological aftermath of everything that happened. The depression is real. Some days I can barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the weight of my mistakes. I've started seeing a therapist, which helps, but it's going to be a long road before getting back to anything resembling normal. I've also been in contact with victim support services, trying to send money to the family I hurt. It's not much, maybe 2,000 baht a month, but it's what I can afford, and it feels like the least I can do. The hardest part is accepting that I'm responsible for everything that happened. It would be easy to blame Nida for the scam, or Danny for the bad investment, or the alcohol for the accident. But the truth is, I made every single decision that led to that prison cell. I chose to trust too easily, to drink too much, to drive when I shouldn't have. If there's anything I want your viewers to take away from this story, it's this. Thailand can be an amazing place to start over, but it's not a place where you can escape the consequences of bad decisions. In fact, those consequences can be much more severe than they would be back home. Be careful who you trust with your money. The romance scam I fell for is incredibly common, and it's designed to exploit the loneliness and vulnerability that many expats feel. If someone you've just met is asking for large sums of money, no matter how legitimate the emergency seems, get a second opinion from someone you trust. Don't drink and drive, ever. The Thai legal system doesn't care about your sob story or your circumstances. If you hurt someone while driving drunk, you're going to prison, and it's going to be worse than anything you can imagine. And finally, don't let pride prevent you from asking for help. If I'd called my parents when I first got scammed, none of the rest of this would have happened. They would have helped me get back on my feet, and I would have avoided the spiral of bad decisions that led to prison. I'm sharing this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. Thailand can be paradise, but it can also be hell, and the difference often comes down to the choices you make when you're at your most vulnerable. Stay safe out there, and maybe think twice before you get on that motorbike. Sincerely, James.